Out.
Thank you, Christina. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Judy Blake, and I am a program coordinator for Family to Family Network here in Houston, Texas. We are very happy to have a guest presenter today from Sewa, Americorps Disaster Preparedness Outreach Team. First, I want to introduce a couple of my colleagues, my amazing colleagues. Leslie Lawson.
Hi, everybody.
Many of you know Leslie. She is an amazing resource and support for our families, has been doing this a very long time. And I also have Christina Zavala joining us.
Hello, hola.
And Christina is a bilingual administrative assistant, and she also does some case management for us as well. We also work with Leonela Castillo, and she might be joining us shortly. These programs and this training is really, really important to our families. We're happy to be able to partner with Sewa, and we have joining us Grant and I lost your name. Is it Jonathan?
Yes.
Oh, I don't see Jonathan anymore. Is he there?
Yes.
Oh, there you are, Jonathan. Yes, my apologies.
Okay.
So just a couple of housekeeping notes. Please make sure that you stay muted. And if you have any questions, please write them in the chat. If you don't feel comfortable asking a question, please private message Leslie, Christina, or myself, and we'll be happy to ask the question on your behalf. Please know that no question is silly. All questions are important, and this is a chance for all of us to learn about disaster preparedness. We thank you so much for joining us, and Grant and Jonathan will have you go from here.
Great. Thank you very much, Judy.
Pleasure.
As was just mentioned, my name is Grant, and I'm here with my partner, Jonathan. This is our pre-survey. And essentially what we do is at Sewa International and Americorps, we're part of the community resilience team and specifically the disaster preparedness team, which means that we go around Houston and serve both children and adults by sharing with them a lot of very useful disaster preparedness information that will not only keep you more physically safe before, during, and after a disaster, but it'll also secure your finances, your property, anything else you may have, being generally prepared for a disaster. So when I say disasters, these are sort of the things I'm talking about, more widespread natural disasters, but also something like pandemic is something that's worth being prepared for as well, since, as I'm sure we all know, given recent events within the last few years, it's something that can still happen and is important to be prepared for if it does happen. So a question we get a lot is why prepare? A lot of times, especially people who are not as financially fortunate, people are a little bit hesitant to be spending money on things like generators or water protection in their house if they're not really sure that they're going to need it or not, because that upfront cost can sometimes be pretty high. But we have this statistic up here that shows that being prepared for a disaster, every $1 you invest in mitigation will actually save you $6 in the response and recovery phase, meaning, at large, that you'll be saving 6 times the amount of money that you would have been spending if you prepare for a disaster. So it is really very important and in your best interest to be prepared for disasters so that you're not paying that much larger amount after a disaster trying to scramble and get everything back together. On top of this, of course, being prepared for a disaster means that the disaster's impact itself will be limited, since the more people that are prepared, the less impact it will have. But then also on an individual level, it will reduce your own fear and anxiety, since there will be less uncertainty and you'll be more sure that you're making the best decision for yourself and then maybe also your community if you want to take the lead on helping others in your area. So here's sort of our table of contents here for the presentation. We're going to start with community preparedness. We'll move into individual and then sort of go into some information related to specific disasters. So,
excuse me for interrupting. Will you be sending me the slide deck so I can forward to people?
I think I can. I might have to ask my supervisor because there's some rules
Proprietary.
about sharing our content, but
Okay. But like a
I
minute
can
of
ask and
recording
make
I'll
sure.
send. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
okay,
you.
no problem. So, community preparedness. I'm assuming, most of us live in a community, so it's very helpful to utilize or capitalize on that community when in a disaster because it'll be easier to limit that disaster's effect if we're all working together and on the same page, as opposed to trying to handle everything on our own and only going by our plan. So, the most important thing to keep in mind for being prepared as a community is knowing what our local needs and community resources are. We're unable to help people who may have special needs if we don't know what those needs are, or how those needs might be an additional difficulty during a disaster. Obviously, people can't control if they have mobility issues or other things that might make it difficult to stay safe during a disaster, like if you have a lot of medical equipment or otherwise that uses power. And so it's important to know who those people are, what needs they have. And then once we know that, we can figure out what resources are available to them so that if a disaster occurs, they're able to get the help that they need, which may be more than the average person may need in a disaster. One way to stay connected and sort of get on the same page during a disaster are these neighborhood groups. If any of y'all have used the Nextdoor app before, that entire app is just it's created to essentially be a forum for you and your community based on different ranges of areas. So it could be your neighborhood. If you live in an apartment, it could be your apartment building. Anything like that is very useful for staying connected with everybody. And then, of course, Facebook groups are another great way of doing that. Over here on the right, this is more if you want to take an active role in disaster preparedness. So, getting out there, checking on your neighbors. You of course don't have to do this, but if you would like to be more active, then it's important to establish a team plan before the disaster, and also making sure that we're assigning tasks and also delegating responsibilities and resources before the disaster as well. Any planning that we want to do, we want to make sure we're doing before something actually happens, because there's going to be a lot of chaos and uncertainty during a disaster that's going to make it almost impossible to set that up during that time. So it will save a lot of time, of course, but also save a lot of stress if you have that set up beforehand. And then, of course, here at the bottom, we have our just sort of general rule of thumb. You are your own source of help until professional help arrives. That, of course, doesn't mean that professional help isn't coming, but unfortunately, sometimes it can take a little while to get there. So it's important that you're able to protect yourself and others around you until they are able to come help you. So, talking about some special needs and senior citizens, of course, these are people who may need some additional help during a disaster, especially if it's a disaster that may require an evacuation. So, a resource that's available to people who have special needs or senior citizens, people who need additional help, is this STEAR, or STEAR, the State of Texas Evacuation Assistance Registry. And if you haven't heard of that before, essentially what that is it's a very, very long list of people within communities who have additional needs and are on this list so that local emergency offices like the fire department or the police department, ambulances are aware of these people's needs and are able to help them during a disaster. It's important to stress that joining the registry does not guarantee help during a disaster. It won't make the fire department come out to your house during an evacuation or anything, but they will be aware of your needs. And if you were to call the fire department, say your grandparent or someone is on this registry and needs help evacuating, all you have to do is call a local fire department, let them know that this is someone that's on steer and that they need assistance evacuating. So you do still have to take that small extra step to have the offices come out, but being on this registry will remove a lot of the difficulty and delays in that process, which of course we don't really have time for during a disaster. So assessing our risks and needs. That's what I was talking about before with letting people know what our additional needs may be. You can put that on a disability information card, which typically we say to list any medical equipment you may have, oxygen tanks. If you're on an IV, making sure that that's listed, what kind of medications in there. Make sure you're giving as much information as possible. More information is always better than less. So any information you feel might even be slightly helpful, have that on your disability information card. And then the self-help team is also sort of like on the last slide, a place to go if you have additional concerns or questions that may need to be addressed within your area or community. So now individual preparedness, the number one best thing we tell everyone to do as an individual to be prepared for a disaster is to make an emergency kit. So some things to include in these emergency kits, general stuff that can be used in any disaster would be, of course, bottled water, canned food, can opener, of course. We've heard many stories of people who evacuate with canned food, but then don't actually have a way to open it because they don't bring a can opener. So not only non-perishable food, but also a way to actually consume that food. All of our medication, of course, $100 to $500 in small bills, because oftentimes the power will go out during disasters. And given how much of our banking and transactions is electronic nowadays, credit card readers won't work if the power's out. If your phone dies, you may not be able to use something like Apple Pay or otherwise. So it's important to have this much cash on hand because you will probably still need to buy things during a disaster. So very important to have. Also general survival stuff like flashlight, Swiss Army knife, stuff like that, and also general overnight things like clothing, toothbrush, toothpaste, all that kind of good stuff. Important documents here in the middle, I will talk about on this next slide. So when I'm talking about important documents, of course, I mean identification. For most adults, if you have a driver's license, that will suffice as official identification. But of course, if you have children or other people who don't have a driver's license, social security card will work. Adoption papers, a birth certificate if they have that. You can also keep just a copy of it because I know some people are not comfortable keeping the actual document in their emergency kit. If you can make a copy of any of those documents, that will also be enough to serve as identification. Identification is usually important, not just so people know who you are in general, but if you're evacuating to a shelter, like a FEMA shelter or a Red Cross shelter, anyone who is admitted to the shelter, including children, will need official ID. So that's why it's important to have like a copy of a birth certificate or social security for children, especially if you're going to a shelter. Financial and legal documentation. A lot of this is property documents, but also bank documents. And most of these are for insurance purposes, of course, right? If we have flood or storm insurance, these are documents that will get that process of getting aid and claims much quicker, because if anyone has ever interacted with FEMA before during a disaster, we know that they move very slowly getting aid. So anything that we can do on our end to make their jobs easier and faster is ideal for us. And then, of course, our medical information, since we're still going to, need medical equipment and medication during a disaster as well. So now we're going to be going into information related to specific disasters. First one, of course, is hurricanes, something we encounter very frequently in Houston. What to do beforehand. So, of course, making sure that if we do need extra assistance during an evacuation, since that can, commonly happen during a hurricane, that we're on the steer registry, making sure that we're practicing our evacuation, especially if we have those special needs. And also making sure that our gas tank is at least 3/4 full. For anyone who's tried to evacuate before from Houston, I'm sure you might have seen a lot of gas stations that get very crowded because people will be trying to get out of the city and either don't have enough gas when they leave or are trying to plan ahead as they're leaving. And not only will the gas stations get very crowded, but sometimes they'll actually run out of gas as well. So it's very important that if you know that there will be stormy conditions or a tropical storm forming in the Gulf, that your car is full of gas or at least three-quarters full so that you don't have to stop when you're evacuating. Of course, the NWS will release advisories based on color and name. Blue is a little bit different than orange and red because blue means that there hasn't been a tropical storm formed or a hurricane formed yet. It's just simply the conditions are there. So it may be rainy or windy in the Gulf, but there isn't any actual storm yet. For all intents and purposes, you can go about your business normally. Now, when the NWS will upgrade the alert to orange or red, that means that a tropical storm or a hurricane has already formed or is in the process of forming in the Gulf, and then is now based on the time frame in which it will make landfall. So, of course, the watch is within 48 hours, and then the red is within, or the warning is within 36 hours. So, those are sort of indicating the immediacy in which the storm will be reaching you. And so ideally, we're being prepared before the orange or at the latest during the orange. We don't really want to be doing the bulk of our preparation during the red alert or the warning phase of National Weather Service, because at that point, many other people will be trying to prepare and there may not be resources available to you that you may need. So here are some other alert options. I'll go through this kind of quickly because it's a lot of text, but these are other very useful alerts that you can get on your phone to stay connected to what emergency organizations are saying about the storm, if the category ever gets upgraded, anything like that. These wireless emergency alerts come from FEMA or the NWS, as we've said. They'll actually text it to you, or I think sometimes they'll also call. And FEMA also has an app. So FEMA, if you download the app, will constantly update you on storm progression, storm growth, things like that. The accessible hazard alert system is a very helpful um, resource for people who may have additional needs. So, people who are hard of hearing, deaf, blind, deaf and blind, they have they make videos with American Sign Language. They also have many other resources for people who may not be able to utilize the standard way that messages are conveyed. And then also here at the bottom, this is a Texas specific resource where it's more on a localized basis, and you ERCOT or ERCOT, it's up in the air, however you want to say it. You can receive very localized information on disasters so that you know how your specific area is being affected. So before, of course, this is a lot of the stuff we've talked about before. If you're planning for an evacuation, we want to be in contact. If you are the parent or guardian of children, making sure that the children know what the evacuation plan is so that they don't have as much stress or confusion during an evacuation, like who will pick them up from school, how they're going to get picked up from school, things like that are very important. And also, when you're evacuating, having a destination in mind is important. This may seem kind of obvious, but a lot of times when people are evacuating, their main focus is just to get out of this city. They're not really concerned where they're going until after they've already left the city, and then they realize that they don't really have a plan in mind of where they may be going or what's available to them. So finding that out beforehand is something that's fairly easy to do and will save you a lot of trouble in the long run. And so now, of course, our pets. If you have pets, um, it may be difficult to evacuate with pets, especially if they're, like large dogs or otherwise. So, one of the best ways to make sure that your evacuation with a pet goes smoothly is practicing it, getting your pet comfortable with a carrier, or at the very least, riding in your vehicle. And, unfortunately, if you're not able to get your pet comfortable with being in the car, there may be some temporary boarding options for you to leave your pet so that you're still able to evacuate safely because as much as we love our pets, our safety is our number one priority, and we want to make sure that we're not going to be causing any danger or safety issues during our evacuation. Um, so this is some more information on the state of Texas registry. We have some information down here on people who are eligible to register for the registry. Of course, people with disabilities, if you have limited mobility, but also people with communication barriers. This is not just for people who have physical disabilities, even if either English isn't your first language, or if you have, if you use sign language, or if you are blind, this is another resource. You still are eligible for this program, and can get assistance from local emergency offices during a disaster and during a evacuation as well. They'll provide transportation assistance. They'll provide personal care assistance, anything that you may need to safely leave the city and then actually return to your home afterwards. So, during, of course, if you're not leaving, then that would mean that you're sheltering in place, you're staying in your house. So, of course, if you're going to stay during a hurricane, you want to stay inside, and you also want to stay in touch as well. Sometimes the National Weather Service or other organizations will release evacuation notices after a storm has already happened, which is rare, but it can happen. So, it's important that you stay connected and know what's going on with the storm even after a storm has already started. Because as this point says, you may have to evacuate after a storm has already begun. So, general information for afterwards. Don't really want to wade in floodwaters. They are not clean. They come up from the ground and mixed with things like pesticides and sewage and animals from the bayou. So, overall, not a good idea to wade in floodwaters if they are avoidable. But then also on top of that, we want to make sure that we're not entering a building until it has been inspected for damages, especially if it's still flooded. But even if it's not flooded, there can be issues like mold, or certain electrical equipment could have been exposed to a large amount of water, which of course is a very dangerous hazard. So we want to make sure that a professional goes in and does a walkthrough of the house beforehand to make sure that it's okay for you to go back in before you try to move back in and set everything back up, because you may cause a health problem with yourself. So this slide, the first two bullet points are sort of what I was already talking about, but the documenting bullet point is something I really like to emphasize, because it goes back to what I was talking about with making things easier for FEMA and other organizations that may be providing some financial support after a disaster. And what this bullet point is saying is that if you take photographs of your property, say if you own house, taking photos of your roof, or just on any property, taking photos of where the floor meets the wall and areas that are on the first floor or the ground floor. That's a very easy way to sort of expedite the process of getting aid from FEMA, because you can take the photos that you took before the disaster and then take photos of any damage that occurred to your property afterwards. And you can definitively show FEMA agents, like, look, this was water damage that you can see was clearly caused by the storm. So there's no, like, we can sort of move the investigation along to there's no question whether or not I'm actually deserving of this aid. Like, I can show you through these photos and this documentation that I did that there's clear evidence that this storm caused this damage. So that's a very easy way to make FEMA's job faster and easier, which is better for us ultimately. So, of course, some general things to include in the emergency kit: rain gear, a weather radio, battery powered, of course. That's a very good way to stay connected if your phone was to die or otherwise. The A lot of alerts still will come over the radio. And non-potable water, the reason why our icon is a bathtub there is because a great way of making sure that you have usable water, not just for drinking, but for, say, flushing the toilet or using any sinks, is by filling up your bathtub before a hurricane and then using that water to actually use any appliances that may use a lot of water, because it's a more cost-effective option than getting a lot of bottles of water. And overall more environmentally conscious because of the plastic usage. So floods, this is a lot of the same information as hurricanes with a couple additional tweaks. Of course, being connected to the weather alerts and everything is a very helpful thing to do that will limit your stress and the impact that the disaster has on you and your community. Floodplain, for those of you who are not aware, floodplains are usually designated by the risk of flooding. So a 10-year floodplain, it's an estimate. So it should ideally only flood once every 10 years or so, a 10-year storm, they call it. And then in a 100-year floodplain should only really flood majorly every 100 years. But of course, it can happen more frequently. It's a general indication of how likely your area is to flood. Um, so during a flood, things to know, since a flood itself may not seem as severe as it's happening, since it's typically just standing water. A lot of people will try to drive through floodwaters or just go about their business after a few days of flooding. And it's very important that if you see floodwaters or you do have to drive during a flood, that you avoid floodwaters if at all possible, because it can be very hard to tell how deep floodwaters are. And of course, we don't want your car, to get damaged, but also yourself. It can be a very dangerous situation if your car becomes submerged in water, because it can be very difficult to escape from the vehicle and protect yourself. So, very important, if at all possible, avoid driving if you can. But if you do have to drive, just avoid driving through any floodwaters that even look shallow, because we just can't tell how deep they really are. Afterwards, a lot of the same stuff. Be wary of mold, electrocution, snakes, and stuff like that. And make sure we're paying attention to authorities. Children can be helpful with cleanups, not so much during floods because they will touch a lot of things, and kids will just see water and decide that they want to swim in it. And so it's important that kids, if they are going to help with the cleanup, are heavily supervised, but ideally they're doing their own thing and adults or teenagers are the ones taking care of cleanup. Um, of course, other general stuff. A lot of plastic sheeting is very good for keeping out moisture, making sure that we have stuff in our car for evacuating a lot of resources, since flooding can last for many weeks sometimes. It can be a longer duration disaster. So now we're going to talk about winter storm, something we don't really encounter as much in Houston, so we can go through it kind of quickly. But of course, given what's happened this year,
Grant, you're freezing up a
pipes,
bit.
exposed pipes, and the pipe cleaners. Did you have something,
Yeah,
Judy?
you froze up for a bit, but that you're okay.
Oh,
You're back now.
okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's what I was saying about protecting your home. If you have any exposed pipes outside, if you have access to any of those like pool noodles that kids use and everything, that's a great way of keeping your pipes outside nice and warm, preventing them from freezing and everything like that. Um, Staying indoors, of course, is the best way to stay warm and also dress warmly. So during the disaster, again, stay inside, stay warm. We want to make sure that our pets are inside and warm as well, since pets are not as conscientiously taking care of their body temperature as humans are. We want to make sure that they are still warm. And also making sure we're driving safely, of course, because of things like ice or other hazardous road conditions. And unfortunately, here at the bottom, carbon monoxide poisoning is a problem that we see more frequently during winter months, because people will be using generators or space heaters, other heating equipment near or inside their home. So it's very important that we are using all of that equipment properly so that we can avoid causing this carbon monoxide poisoning. So, as I was saying, frequently people will use generators during the winter, especially if the power goes out, because we still want to stay warm and have our central heating work. So the general rule of thumb for using generators, of course, never use a generator inside your house. And when using a generator outside of your house, it should be out, um, not within 20 feet of any doors or windows in your home, because within that distance, the fumes from the generator can get into the eaves of your roof and can still cause a carbon monoxide buildup in your house. Um, and so, as a good last line of defense, having carbon monoxide and smoke detectors installed near every sleeping area in your home will protect you if an accident occurs where, the generator is maybe too close to your house and you're running it overnight. Carbon monoxide starts to build up in your house. Without the detectors, you would never even know that carbon monoxide was building up in your house. So, it's important to have these kinds of alarms near sleeping areas, so that if this starts to happen, it'll wake you up and you can quickly leave the house without having, very negative health repercussions for that. So these are some of the general health conditions that may arise during extreme cold. Frostbite is not typically something we see in Houston, as it doesn't usually, people aren't exposed to the cold long enough in Houston to experience frostbite, but hypothermia is definitely very common for any cold weather. Oftentimes getting cold or getting wet in weather that is not even below freezing can give you hypothermia. And so thankfully, because it's a less serious condition, it can be treated by getting out of the cold. Drying off is very important, of course, and getting somewhere warm. That's the best and easiest way to treat hypothermia. If, numbness and changing color of the skin happens, then it might be progressing to frostbite. And at that point, you would actually have to go see a doctor to get that treated. So afterwards, some general stuff again, making sure we're not using wet electrical equipment, throwing out food that was damaged is snow and ice melt is still not safe really to consume, and also cleaning everything that got wet. So here's a lot of the stuff that we can include in the emergency kit. A lot of it's pretty intuitive, but I like to emphasize the sand, rock salt, or kitty litter, because that I feel like that sort of implies that they have the same function, but they don't. They all are related to sort of ice and moisture, but sand is, usually just for absorbing any moisture that may come from water from melting. Rock salt will actually help ice melt faster. So if your driveway was frozen, or I guess if you had a lot of rock salt, the street in front of your house, you could spread that there and it would help the ice melt quicker so that you wouldn't have to worry about sliding around on your driveway. Kitty litter won't make the ice melt any faster, but it will give you some additional traction on the ice. So if you have like cats and a lot of extra kitty litter on hand, you could spread that on your driveway so that you don't have to worry about like your car or other people using the driveway slipping on the ice and potentially hurting themselves. So extreme heat. This is something that is very common in Houston, and it says I like to point out that it says humid, hot, and unusually humid weather for more than 2 days. That definition is actually just any temperature above 95 degrees. So essentially, that is the entire summer in Houston. So this is a very important thing to know, since a almost 3 month long disaster is um, it can be concerning if you're not prepared for that kind of thing. So, of course, we want to make sure that our AC and central heating, everything works before the disaster, because we don't want to wait till it gets hot outside and then realize that our AC unit has problems because it's already hot. There's not much we can do about the heat at that point. And it can also be hard to repair equipment in very hot conditions. Some information we have over here on the right for people with disabilities or older adults. They are at increased risk during extreme heat, because people with spinal cord injuries might have additional difficulty regulating their internal body temperatures. So if their body temperature goes up, it's going to be harder for them to bring it back down. But also people with severe mental health conditions can experience difficulty during this time too, because their medications will make it harder for them to regulate their internal body temperature. And if it's very hot outside, there's not a lot that they can do to protect themselves from the heat. So if you're in these populations, there's not much we can do living in Houston to avoid the heat, but being aware that you have an increased risk will allow you to sort of approach the extreme heat with more preparedness and with more confidence so that you have less likelihood of encountering one of these problems. So another resource that's available to many people is this LAHEAP or LAHEAP. I don't actually know if it's an acronym that you say that way, but it stands for the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program. And with funding as it is right now, it's sometimes difficult to get into that program. But what they will do is that if a organization you're a part of partners with LAHEAP, they will actually they will give the organization money to then give to the people they serve in order to do things like AC and heater maintenance. They'll even actually come out to your house and install an air conditioning unit or a heater if you don't have those things. The entire program is built around getting home energy assistance to individuals who may not have it, but that absolutely need it, especially in a place like Houston, where not having AC in the summer could be a very, very big problem for your own health. So during there's a since many people have, I'm sure, experienced the summer in Houston, this is, I'm sure, many things that you guys have done before: wearing loose, light-fitting clothing, of course, using our air conditioning. um, we only want to use electrical equipment like fans when the temperature is beneath 80 or 95 degrees, because electrical equipment and heat often do not mix. It'll cause it to malfunction, and we never want to cause like an electrical fire or anything during the summer, because fires can spread a lot faster if there's a lot of heat. So, some of the health conditions that can arise are heat exhaustion, heat stroke. Heat cramps are typically a symptom of these two. Heat exhaustion is less serious. Typically, if someone's experiencing heat exhaustion, all you need to do is get them in the shade, get them Gatorade, water, something to drink, and they'll be fine within an hour or two. If someone is experiencing heat stroke, you can tell because they will stop sweating, which of course is very bad. And if someone is experiencing heat stroke, there's nothing that we can do out in the field to treat that. At that point, it's time to, call 911 or get them to a hospital as quickly as possible, because they'll need to be put on an IV and monitored to make sure that their body temperature comes back down. Um, Again, a lot of general stuff, not emergency disaster. We're almost at the end. This is talking about, say, like a home fire or an active shooter situation, any disaster that we can't really plan for because we're not able to tell when it's going to happen. For a home fire specifically, the Red Cross recommends having two escape routes from your home. And that's of course because if some debris or smoke is blocking one of your exits, you want to have another exit, which can be a window, available to you so that you can get out of your home as quickly as possible. On top of this, having a destination or a spot in mind where you will meet everyone after getting out of the house is important to set up, especially if you look after children, because we want to make sure that once you're out of the house, you're not, wondering, is someone still inside? Did someone make it out and they're not with me? We want to make sure that everyone knows where they're meeting once they get out of the house, so that if someone's not there, you can reasonably assume if they're not with me, they must still be in the house because we know where we're going to be meeting. So that's a very important thing to have as part of your fire escape plan. So lastly here, we're going to go through some general information about what to do after disaster. Of course, if we're going to be aiding the injured, we want to check for breathing. We A lot of EMT and like CPR training will talk about the ABCs. We want to look for airway, breathing, and circulation. So if your victim's not breathing, obviously a big problem, and it should be, at that point you can call 911 and they'll be able to help that person more. If someone's very cold, putting a blanket over them and not trying to, ideally, we're not going to be doing a lot of the treatment on the injured because we can call emergency services or someone else who can come address that. But it might be helpful to stabilize that patient. But also, we want to make sure that if we are helping other people, especially very frequently, that we're aware of our own needs as well, because we don't want to overwork ourselves, overstress ourselves, and then not be able to help other people and actually become someone who needs help themselves. So, making sure that we're aware of our own limits, of our own health and safety is very important when helping after a disaster. So the other most important thing, whenever there isn't a disaster, we want to make sure that we are updating our emergency kits, and also updating, things like carbon monoxide alarms. Even if the batteries still work, every few years you might still need to replace the detector itself because the chemical, magical everything that works in the detector will eventually stop working and has an expiration. So eventually, after 5 or so years, you'll need to get an entirely new detector for it to work properly. Of course, food, even in cans, can still go bad. So making sure that it has not expired, as well as your medication. So that essentially puts us at the end of our presentation.
Thank you
Thank
very,
you
very
guys very
much.
much.
So Christina put in the chat, and if you could post it again, Christina, the survey link. And it says the first question, will this information help you at your next ARD meeting? We know that we didn't discuss the ARD meeting, but it's a general survey that we use for the year. So we're just asking, was this information helpful for you to prepare for a disaster? So if you could please complete the survey. Grant and Jonathan, thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions for them? And if you're a bit bashful, you can private message any one of us, Leslie, Leonella, Christina, or myself. Wow, no questions.
Must have been a great presentation.
That's right. You betcha. You betcha. Something I did want to mention to families is if you're on Facebook, please check out the Family to Family. Thank you, Carolina. Please check out our page. There is and I don't know, Grant and Jonathan, if you're aware of it, there is a Disaster Ready Expo for people with disabilities at George R. Brown. And if you look at, hold on one second, I'm going to bring it up. It's a free conference. I mean, not free conference, a free expo at George R. Brown, and it is being held on Saturday, a week from Saturday, I believe. And I will go ahead and put the link in the chat so that you can go ahead and register. If you want to go ahead and stop sharing your screen, that would be great. And but feel free to register for that expo. This is the first time I'm going to be going to it. I was not able to go to previous ones. I think this is the first time they've had it in a few years. I think there'll be lots of information, and I would hope that it would help our families. Something that I did want to mention to the group is, if you have a loved one and you're on this call and maybe intellectually they might be compromised, what you might want to consider is some kind of social story to explain, okay, if there is a fire, if there is a storm, if there is flooding, if there is a power outage. Social stories can be really helpful for our kids and young adults. You can Google them, social stories for emergency preparedness. So I would definitely suggest that you do that. We know that our families are stretched very, very, very thin. Statistically, Family to Family Network, our families probably, let me see, their annual household income is probably under like 55,000 for a family of 4. So we are definitely helping those that are underserved. I think that the information that Jonathan and Grant had was great information, so important. I just want you to know that we also realize our families are struggling day by day just to meet basic food, medical, transportation needs. So we do understand that. This is best practices for disaster preparedness, and it was great information. And we just want our families to be safe, and we want them to be prepared. I will go ahead and send the recording if you email me. Let me go ahead and put my email in the chat. If you would like a copy of the recording, please feel free to email me, and I'd be happy to share it with you.
Also, Judy, could I mention that we're going to have this presentation in Spanish?
Yes.
For Spanish speakers next week at 6 p.m., next Wednesday at 6 p.m.
Yes, and we are having an encore presentation. Thank you, Christina. In English tonight at 6 o'clock. So if you want to share this with anyone, they just need to register, and we will make sure that they join us as well. Grant and Jonathan, if you could just stay on after. Everyone else, have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us. Next up in June, we have Medicaid waivers. We are going to be talking about the waivers, HCS, class, Texas Home Living, MDCP, and more. So that will be June 18th at 12 p.m. and 6 p.m. And then on June 25th will be the Spanish version of Medicaid waivers. So make sure that you save the date, tell your family, tell your friends. We'd love to have everyone join us. Thank you so much. Have a great day.